Joel, we have a really interesting show for everyone this week. GE has hit a little bit of roadblock in its renewable business. We'll talk about the details there of what's next for GE Renewables and GE Vernova. Big losses in the third quarter, how are they going to recover from that? And then we'll talk about ACP, Offshore. That happened in Providence, Rhode Island, where we had 2,000 people show up and discuss the future of offshore the United States and what some of the roadblocks are and what the OEMs and operators' concerns are. And then we'll have a special guest. Matthew Stead, CEO and co-founder of Ping, talks to us about the growth of their continuous monitoring system. I'm Alan Hall, president of WeatherGuard Lightning Tech, and I'm here with my good friend from Wind Power Lab, Joel Saxon. Rosemary is on a well-deserved break, and this is the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. GE had an announcement this week. They released a third quarter results, and GE as a whole is doing decently fine. The aircraft division is looking like it's stabilizing and picking up some numbers because airlines are flying again. Mm-hmm. Healthcare seems to be doing okay, but the power and renewable business is really in trouble. The renewable part, so power and renewables were actually broken out separately, which is going to be enveloped by Vernova. So if you take Vernova, take power, non-renewables, and renewables and look at them separately, their renewable energy part lost about it's $900 million in the quarter. And it's based on about 40% plummet in sales. 40% plummet in orders and about 15% drop in sales. And GE's talking about restructuring that business to save money. And as we've heard, the onshore business, wind business for GE, they're talking about 20% layoffs. It sounds like those are in process at the moment. And they're trying to save about $500 million annually. But the numbers are really depressing. If you look at what renewables is going to lose this year, it's around $2 billion. At least that's the way GE is projecting it. So every other part of the GE business is profitable. Depends on how much, it's relative, right? They're all not doing whiz bang, but they're profitable except for renewables. And it looks like some of the bigger pain points are inflation, supply chain, warranty claims. It looks like that's another big issue. And just overall lower demand because of the production tax credit expiring and now being picked up again finally. But boy, Joel, it does not look good for GE right now. Those kind of losses are really hard to sustain for much longer, you'd think.
Before we started recording here today, we were talking offline. I'm looking at this chart. And anybody that is knows, you don't have to know anything about economics or accounting or anything to look at this chart and understand there's some problems. Right. It's just every other portion of GE's business up, and steady negative income or operating revenue. And then all of a sudden this drop this quarter. So, there's a lot of we've been talking about a lot of things in renewables and these majors laying off a lot of people. Siemens laid off a bunch of people. GE has laid off a bunch of people. It's very depressing to cruise through my LinkedIn feed lately and see all these really, really bright people from GE searching for jobs. So while bad for them to have to go through that transition, it's going to be a bonus to a lot of these other companies picking up some really good talent.
Oh, yeah.
But, and I've seen a lot of people, really cool things about people vouching for other people as well. Like, hey, I'm looking for a job, and someone else jumping on there going, hey, I worked with this person. They're awesome. Someone's going to get a real good person there. So it's nice to see the renewable industry coming together when one of these big companies is taking a drop. But $2 billion in the red, you can't survive that for a whole long time, right? And joining up with the GE, the power side of things to become GE Vernova, when they do, that will alleviate some of these pains. But man, when they say rising waters floats all ships, a drought also sinks all ships.
Yeah, so that's what's happening. if they can manage it. Right now, Power Renewables are leaning on the aircraft division, the engine division, to keep GE moving in a forward direction. But as soon as these split up into three separate areas, where Vernova is by itself, where do you go for cash flow to sustain those kind of losses? You really can't. You can't rely on the bigger GE to do that unless there's some sort of accommodations made when they decide to finally break into three. How are they going to do that financially? That becomes a really big marker of time when that split actually happens and they all go independent of one another. And GE is divesting, by the way. GE is divesting of all sort of corporate assets. They got rid of Crotonville, which is a big training center, or planning to. So won't be anything left of GE proper. It'll be three divisions for sure. I don't know how you sustain it. I don't know where in today's market you get loans to sustain yourself for another 6 months.
Yeah, we were talking about, is it a too big to fail type thing where, like the Ford got the bailouts and stuff. And
yes,
I don't know. I mean, you want to think that the U.S. government could help a little bit, but being that they're going to move to France, the headquarters, that may play into that, some decision of that sort. So, Alan, let's think about, I'm looking at another chart here, and why they're having expected losses. They say largely due to incremental warranty pressure, inflation, and lower demand. So inflation's an easy one to see. We all feel that, right? You feel that at the gas pump. You feel it at the grocery store. It's the other day I went to get milk and it was like $6 a gallon. So
yeah.
When did this happen?
Eggs.
Like this is
right.
Yeah, eggs, like simple stuff, right? So we're all feeling inflation. We can understand that one. That's number two here. Lower demand. Lower demand. I want to think that that's going to come back around, just simply because.
How far out? Is that
that's the problem. That's the problem. And I'm thinking it's coming back around for IRA reasons. So I had a conversation with a friend of mine in the development space. They are a surveyor, planner, mapper, and they do utility lines and installations, all this stuff, but they do it on a state countrywide basis. They're a big group. And this gentleman mentioned to me, hey, 10 different people coming in with large developments in the last 2 months since IRA bill. So to me, I'm like, yes, that's awesome. Now, that's 10, just groundbreaking, looking at permits, looking at survey, looking at this stuff. So that doesn't turn into a wind turbine order or a solar panel order for a long time. And then, you have to fight, GE right now is in the middle of that offshore fight. So there's a little bit of, you might lean more towards a Vestas or a Siemens Gamesa when you're installing these things. So there's also that pressure within the market. So that's the lower demand side of things. And then the third one here, incremental warranty pressure. Now, we've talked about this before as well. I mean, we sit in that space where we are fighting with warranties or helping asset owners fighting with warranties, fighting with root cause analysis for manufacturing defects, all these different things. So I think that some of the last 10, 15 years of this booming incremental growth and short innovation cycles with blades and some things like that are starting to rear their head with these guys. I mean, Alan, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I definitely think so. It seems like all the OEMs are concerned about the rapid increase in the number of blades, the types of turbines. The race to 20 megawatts, which is where we're all headed, is putting a huge strain financially on all the OEMs. And all it takes is a little bit of a hiccup to really put a company under financial strain. And GE has hit that hiccup. And for whatever reason, there is not a lot to do about it. I mean, just because of the timing, right? So you can look at the different reasons why they've reached these financial impact numbers. But the problem is with the inflationary pressure that's going to exist, that's looking like it's another year, maybe two, is the discussion in the economic communities, that it gets really hard to finance things. And it's getting really hard on the supply chain. The supply chain costs are not going to go down. So you got the pressure from the bottom on your suppliers coming up, giving you less and less margins. And then, like we're going to see in this California offshore auction, there's going to be a lot of money set aside. So the OEMs don't have a lot of room to operate in. That doesn't make for a very attractive business. And
No.
if GE Vernova becomes a listed stock, which it will, what happens there? And the stock markets are going to look at what 6-month future is, and they're going to see huge losses. I would assume,
Well,
at least in the near term. But
yeah, I mean,
what's the U.S. going to do about it? I think what you and I are trying to get to is like, what is the U.S. government, state agencies, whatever, going to do about it? Because if you do lose GE, or GE really ramps down, which it may do, you don't have a domestic supplier.
Yeah, and I mean, with the contraction of the economy in general, and inflation running away with really, I mean, from my research, not a whole lot of end in sight. It's hard to get capital right now, right? And
Yeah, it is.
And understanding that every single development that GE is going to be a part of, that is going to, I mean, the product of GE Renewables is the turbines, right? And the service side of things, and the service side of things probably does just fine, but the turbines is where the money is, and where the money is being made and lost.
Right.
If you don't have capital readily available within your economy, all of those projects are super capital intensive. Like nobody has half $500 million in their, in a can out back that's like, I'm going to go build a wind farm. You got to go and finance that thing. Right. And the finance rates are so high, you're going to hold off. Everybody's kind of holding their horses a little bit, going like, what is this economy going to do? When it gets back on track, maybe we'll pull the trigger, but right now, not so much. So that's a cascading effect all the way back to that GE's wind platforms that just aren't being sold.
Well, does this lend itself, and I've been saying this for the last year, that a developer grabs hold of an OEM, maybe not in whole, but at least in part, to provide the financial stability? So say a company like Ørsted, even though it's not truly an independent company, it's owned by Denmark, right? Isn't that the basis of that?
Yeah.
If Ørsted decided to grab hold of an OEM, basically to lower their costs, that would take pressure off. But if you combine the two together, an owner-operator with a manufacturer, that does seem like the best combination. It's sort of what China does in a top-level sense. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking at it being an American need to create wind turbines, particularly in the States, I don't know how you're going to do it without someone, a Berkshire Hathaway, an Ørsted. Somebody's a big player.
Brookfield,
yeah, right. Coming in someone and saying, capital. "Hey, we're gonna buy a quarter of GE Vernova, and we're gonna lower our costs. We can buy turbines at cost, and yet we can provide a constant revenue stream for this OEM that's making these turbines, thereby keeping a stable supply chain."
I think right now the play in that, if you were to look at it, would be someone that's going to do floating offshore.
Yeah.
Because that's the only gap, right? That's the only one that's not quite figured out.
Right.
Because I don't know of a whole lot of operators, maybe besides Ørsted or an EDF or a NextEra, that would have that kind of capital. NextEra would have that capital.
Well, they would. You think that they would, but why would GE go into that marketplace, right? With all the downside risks they have right now on onshore and the limited offshore that they're in, why would you invest money in floating offshore right now? I think if you are heading that company, that'd be the last thing you want to do, is make such a huge bet.
It would have to be in someone massively cash rich, an Equinor. To grab someone to say, we are now going to develop offshore floating with you, and now we are Equinor and whoever it is, SGR, EVS, Vestas, whatever, and we're going to take on offshore floating. We're going to be the ones.
I agree,
but I mean,
I think it has to go there.
It could. I mean, it's so far. It seems economically far fetched just because of the amount of capital involved, and something like that would be wild. I'm just thinking,
what's the book value of a GE Vernova though in a year?
Yeah, it might be a steal.
Right, they may not have any choice. Right, you could get a hostile takeover of a GE Vernova just because of the the difficulty in which it is in right now, which we've seen in the United States all the time. Historically great companies have a weak year and they get taken over because they know there's intrinsic value in this asset. It's just low at the moment. And so these crazy takeover things happen in these oddly inflationary times. It's a possibility. And I hope it doesn't happen, man. I hope GE can figure this thing out. I really, really do. But it's not looking good right now. And you just hope that, the leaders that they have in place can steer this ship through these difficult waters. It's not going to get easier over the next 6 months.
I'm thinking about the last big kind of merger. It wasn't a hostile merger, but like merger takeover and how it worked out. And what comes to mind is MHI Vestas.
Right.
And it didn't work out. Right. They tried it. They they ended up going like, yeah, nope. And splitting back up. So, in my mind, and this is, of course, this is just a armchair thought from some dummy in the wind industry. I'm thinking GE Vernova, based in France, in a bunch of power generation. They start to look pretty poor in 6 months to a year. EDF is down the street, and they're big into the power generation on nuclear and renewables, everything.
Right.
So,
yeah. There's going to be a lot of action, right? And I just keep an eye on these economic numbers. And when we see these quarterly reports come out, it's good to do a little bit of a deep dive into them to quasi predict the future. A little bit of turbulence ahead.
Get the latest on wind industry news, business, and technology sent straight to you every week. Sign up for the Uptime Tech newsletter at weatherguardwind.com/news.
So Joel, we talked about the number of conferences that happened simultaneously in the U.S. and Europe, and another one happened, which was ACP Offshore Wind Power that was in Providence, Rhode Island. And that's an interesting one because that's where most of the offshore development is going to happen. It's right off the shores of Providence. And they had a number of high-level executives from the operators and OEMs. And some of the things they were talking about, I think, are indicative of what the industry is feeling. In particular, Molly Morris, who is the U.S. offshore wind chief for Equinor. I'll quote her because I don't want to get us out of perspective here. It says, "I believe you would paint an image if there continues to be vital delays and initiatives which might be already within the pipeline getting pushed again, meaning pushed to the right schedule-wise, then it's going to be harder to fulfill that 30 by 30 target." So what she's saying is there's been too many delays up to this point, and we're now getting real close to 2030 because it takes a certain amount of time to develop these projects. If we don't get going, we're going to miss our target. Obtaining permits was a fear of a lot of the owner-operators, who mentioned the environmental reviews need to be speedier and carried out with a little more consistency and transparency. You remember that a large operator, developer like Equinor sees a lot of permitting within their company across the world. So they have a lot of knowledge in the UK, and now they're getting experience in the United States. And I'm sure they can cross-compare and see how fast things are developed in certain countries and not in others. And they see there's headwinds in the United States in terms of this project's moving faster, it's getting permitted faster than this other project. They don't know why. There's no consistency. That's a big issue because the number of projects we're going to develop, that needs to get straightened out pretty quickly. And then from Siemens Gamesa, one of their representatives was talking and said, they're in an industry that's taking off like a rocket ship, yet there's a lot of us, OEMs, across the entire value chain, or suppliers across the value chain, that are struggling to do it at a profit that allows us to continue investing in technology. So Siemens Gamesa is making the same argument everybody's making, that the potential growth of the industry is very high, and yet the profitability of these companies is struggling. So it sounds like a lot of the discussions at ACP Offshore Wind Power were very similar to some of the things we heard over in Hamburg, that the industry in general is struggling with governmental agencies, on some level, even in the bid process, the auctions that are happening. I think they feel like the auctions are drawing too much value out of the food chain there, where the OEMs and operators can't work effectively. Do these comments seem out of line with things that you're hearing, or pretty much are you hearing the same sort of things?
Same stuff, and it's onshore as well. Grid interconnects and getting those people to jump on board, and environmental permitting, and a Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, all these different things. Like we talked about with that facility going on up in, I think it was Massachusetts, where they had we counted like 7 agencies where they had to get permits from just to extend this thing 500 meters so they could land a vessel there. So. One of the roles of ACP within wind here, American Clean Power Association, and they do a pretty good job of it, is advocating for the industry at a federal level, a state level, a community level, to make sure that these things move forward for the industry. Like these people, a Siemens Gamesa or a Vestas or a GE or even large operators and stuff, like some of their dues that they pay to the ACP organization are massive. You're talking. There's millions in that pot, right? And that money goes to, for lack of a better term, lobbying for the industry. Sure. So I hope that at this ACP Offshore Wind Power Convention, was on the East Coast up towards, Rhode Island, where there's it easily accessible for a lot of our elected officials to be there. And I believe there was quite a few of them speaking there. I hope they heard this. And in this big forum of offshore energy developers, operators, supply chain was there speaking loud enough for their elected officials to hear. Guys, we need help. We want to hit this 30 by 30. We're in lockstep with you, Biden administration, to get this done. We have the capital. We've got the people. We're moving assets. We're trying to build ships. We're doing all this stuff. But you guys have got to take the damn roadblocks down. Get these hurdles out of the way. Like let's make this happen. Because what it sounds like as well is, in any good organization, say if it was Joel and Alan Inc., we build our company on processes, and this is how we do things. It seems like the processes are rocky and not quite right, because they're getting approvals over here and doing the same stuff over here, but not getting it over here, and it's kind of individual by the person they're talking to, and it's frustrating to watch happen from afar, because of course we can't personally do anything about it, but share our voices and hope they get heard as well. But man, I hope that some of the money that the U.S. government is spending on some things gets put into permitting these offshore energy projects and onshore energy projects to get them moving.
Yeah, and that's why ACP and NREL, and I think there was like 300 people involved in the creation of that offshore best practice document, I'll call it. It's to try to clear these roadblocks, but that only clears roadblocks if the agencies involved accept that.
And listen to
best practices, right? And take that on. I'm not sure they're getting a sort of a top-down push from the heads of those administrations, those different agencies, to implement those. And what we seem to be happening is here in Albany, New York area, we're getting sidetracked all the time. And I'm not sure, who knows the reason exactly why, but it does seem like it needs a little bit of management involvement. Right. It's like running a fast food, use an analogy. It's like running a fast food chain. If you walk into, say, McDonald's and there's no manager there, it tends to be a little chaotic. Everybody's sort of doing their own thing. That's what it kind of feels like right now. And I'm sure the OEMs and the developers are sort of feeling the same thing. Like consistency. If I walk into a McDonald's in California or a McDonald's in Massachusetts, I should have the same experience. I should have the same quality of food. I should get the same response. And when I make an order, it should take a minute to shove it out. Whatever those numbers are, that's management, right? That tends to be where management comes in and controls it over the high-level processes that occur. We're not necessarily seeing that in the government agencies that are involved in permitting all these offshore projects to occur, and there's a continual repeating chorus of
that's good. I like that
of owners and operators, OEMs, saying, "Hey, the machinations we're having to go through to get things permitted are really slowing us down and not adding value." I think it's the adding value piece is really the concerning part. Like we're going to get this permit, but it's taking us a lot longer than it should. Why can't we fix that? And I don't know if ACP has been super pushy about that. They've noted it, and I'm sure, and I've been in places where they've talked about it. But you got to wonder I kind of wonder what's going on behind the scenes, right? What's happening behind the curtain? Is ACP going up to senators and saying, "We need you to step in. Hey, Congressperson, we need you to make this phone call to the EPA or whoever it's going to be, to the Corps of Engineers." What's happening behind the scenes? Because whatever they're doing right now is not seeming to have a huge effect.
So is it the fact that, and maybe you know this or someone listening knows this answer and could comment to us or let us know. I just don't personally, but do we have a renewable energy czar or a renewable energy task force in a lead? And because are we just throwing all these things into a black hole, into DC and just going like, figure it out, but there's no racy model to see who's actually responsible and accountable for it?
That's what it feels like, Joel. The head of the Department of Energy, which is Jennifer Granholm, is traveling around the country, and she's very vocal and energetic, and she's talking up these projects. But when you start following the chain that she's created and all the things she's talking about, you go, "Oh my gosh, Google couldn't manage this." there's too much going in too many different directions. Yeah. You can't manage it, right? Which is, I think, the problem they're having. And obviously, the Department of Energy can only do so much. There's other agencies that they're working with or competing with, whatever the case is here.
Right.
Where, what is the head of the Department of Energy going to do? Right? If the EPA says we're not going to do this thing, they're not going to do it, and that's where those management steps in, right? That's where management steps in. Maybe the White House steps in and says, "Okay, this is what we're going to do, everybody." I just don't. It's that the sum total right now. If you take the collective comments from all the different OEMs and the owner operators, and you start to connect them together, isn't that the message that you're starting to coalesce around?
Well, I think it's clear. I don't even think it's a message that's starting to coalesce. I think it's gelled and it's concrete. Every single person is saying, this is not going forward fast enough. It's not going forward in the right way. We need more help. I mean, from OEMs to developers to the supply chain. The only people I know that are eating really well right now are the geophysical and geotechnical surveyors that are out there just driving around in grids. They're doing all right.
Some of that. Did you see that on LinkedIn the other day about them surveying?
That's my old life, man. Yeah, I know some people that have retired on that stuff already.
That particular part of the earth has been scanned pretty well over the last year. It's a little shocking.
If anybody's interested in what we're talking about, you can go on to a website called marinetraffic.com, and it tracks the AIS signals of every commercial vessel in the world. And you can go and zoom in on the area where the New York Bight auction is, and you can just see all these vessels grid left, right, up, down, left, right, up, down for the last few years, doing UXO surveys and geotechnical surveys and geophysical surveys, mapping the seabed, all this good jazz. It has to happen before any of these things go forward for planning purposes. But those guys they've been eating well. They've had some good Christmases.
Well, you have to know what's down there, right? We've already seen in some places where they've had trouble driving monopiles and putting cables in, right? So it's well worth the investment. I'm sure it's going to de-risk a lot of
well,
things.
And it's a big part of the permitting process. It's a big part of the permitting process. Like you can't go forward without having a plan of what's out there, what you're going to put in the ground, all these different things. So those guys have been cruising out there. I mean, I know people that started out there 3 years ago shooting stuff or surveying stuff before these auctions even came close to happening.
Well, do you feel like, let's put this in perspective, do you feel like the developers, management-wise, have been on top of it, and that they're really pushing as hard as they can without creating too much chaos, but there's just a wall there? There's just a government wall there. Isn't it what it's starting to feel like? That I feel like an Equinor is throwing a lot of people at this problem. I definitely Avangrid and some or Stead or Dominion are throwing a lot of people at these problems to resolve them. But
I mean,
the response back seems slow.
There's 2,000 people at ACP Offshore Wind Power, right?
Yeah, right.
And if we know anything about conferences, it's a couple of people from each company go, not 100.
Right.
So
right.
Then you're talking 1,000 companies that were represented there, or 500 at the least. That's a lot of companies for only having 7 wind turbines in the water. So there's definitely a lot of people and a lot of effort going forward on this thing, and that 30 by 30 goal, as we talk about all the time, it's just kind of starting to slip.
Well, and let me throw this other angle on it. Is it the last couple of months? Have you felt like the administration has been struggling to try to get through November? That they see the elections coming up. As of right now, the polling is not really going their way in a lot of states, that they're just locked into this election cycle, and we're not going to see anything until November 9th or 10th when all that resolves itself. So we're a couple of weeks away from that. Right. Is it just, hey, we got to get through this election thing and then we'll get back on it and we could really get going? Or will the election and whatever's going to resolve on that, and who knows right now?
Yeah.
Does that just create more chaos so that it doesn't get resolved? What's the feeling there?
100%. The elections are taking over everything right now. I'll give you a picture of the scene from my house on Sunday. I was watching the football game with my lovely better half, who is Canadian, and she could not believe the amount of political commercials. I mean, and it was just, this person's horrible, and that person got an F in elementary school, and just every commercial, every single one of 1, 2, 3, 4, after one after another. You'd have a commercial break during a football game, and there would be 5 political commercials. That's all that the political world is focused on right now, is these elections, and it's frustrating because okay, we're 10 days, 12 days away. That will calm down, but there will be some fallout from it, right? You're going to see some power swings and some of those things. And that always, of course, affects the economic environment within the U.S. That's how things work here. So, I think they might be in just kind of a holding pattern. There was this article I saw the other day, and I'm not a CIA spy or anything. I don't know if this is true or not, but that Biden administration was pissed off at Saudi Arabia because they were gonna not hold, so the fuel prices would increase right before the election. And it literally was this is what they said. That's horrible if that's the case. No, I'm not politically pandering or anything, but if that's your focus right
happening. Now, I heard somebody give it a good example of this. When gas prices rise, that you'll have lines at the gas pump to save 5 cents, right? But you won't have those same lines in other places. So gas prices, because it's so visible in the United States, really drive elections in some cases, and this one may be one of them, where there's not a lot that the government is going to be able to do about it. I know they're trying to release, obviously, petroleum reserves and talk to Venezuela, it sounds like, and Saudi Arabia at times. It just, the problem with that is it just devotes so much time to things that may not make any difference, and there's other things happening. You got to be able to walk and chew gum is the
it's temporary
phrase, right? You're right. Even if all that is still happening, the economy churns on and you're missing opportunities, right? And that's where I think this is going to be a struggle.
Yeah. And, not to take anything away from our struggles, but if our European friends and other countries of the world friends are listening right now, and we're talking about, $2 or €2 a liter fuel and being bent out of shape about it, they're laughing at, or, because right now it's not even close to what their fuel prices are. So we're feeling pain, but not like our friends are across the seas. So,
I hope this little election bit goes pretty fast and we get over it. I saw some disappointing things today where ships full of diesel fuel that was headed to Europe, in fact, some of it was docked over there, are now coming to the States because we're running out of diesel fuel in the United States. So we're in this tete-a-tete with Europe on energy, and that's not helpful.
That's not cool. No,
that's not cool.
Yeah.
No, I'm not cool with that.
No,
nope.
Diesel.
Nope.
I'm here in northern Wisconsin, and I was in town yesterday, and regular unleaded was like $3.60 a gallon, and diesel fuel was like $5.40, I think.
Yeah,
it's like $2 a gallon more.
It's been as low. I think the discussion. I listened to this trucker overnight show,
and they were talking about nothing to get our news.
No, well, because if you want to hear about energy prices, that's where you go, right? If you want to hear about diesel prices, fuel prices, that's where you go. And the reserves of the United States are really low, historically low right now. And I think this is why you're seeing tankers come to the United States with diesel fuel. That doesn't even make any sense. But I think it goes back to just the energy policies we have in place and who's at the controls managing this. You just don't feel like anybody's there at the moment, and wind is going to suffer for it, unfortunately, and that's a real shame because the United States could do a lot of great things at the moment, and we are, but we could be doing so much more.
Lightning is an act of God, but lightning damage is not. Actually, it's very predictable and very preventable. Strike Tape is a lightning protection system upgrade for wind turbines made by WeatherGuard. It dramatically improves the effectiveness of the factory LPS so you can stop worrying about lightning damage. Visit weatherguardwind.com to learn more, read a case study, and schedule a call today.
We have a special guest from Down Under. We have Matthew Stead, co-founder and CEO of Ping at Wind Energy Hamburg. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Matthew, this show, today's Friday, it's the last day of the show. The show's been massive. There have been thousands of people coming by the Ping booth this week. Just give us some of your impressions of all that's happened this week. It's been tremendous.
Yeah, I mean, so many people. I think there's a bit of excitement that Wind Energy Hamburg's back on again.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Quick side note, we launched here 4 years ago, so it's a bit of a reunion.
A nice one.
A nice one, yeah. But yeah, people have come past, operators, a mixture of OEMs, people, industry people. So I guess I think blades are a hot topic, no surprise there. And I think people are becoming aware that there is an ability to have a continuous monitoring program. So I think, the tide is turning. People are realizing digitization, continuous monitoring, it's a thing, it's here,
right.
It's the way to go.
And it's gotten to the point of it's beyond the infancy stage.
Yeah, it's mature.
Which 4 years ago, it was at the infancy stage.
Yeah,
Everybody was just trying to figure it out a little bit. But we're here 4 years later. It seems like the implementation phase is really kicking in. And I know you had a couple of larger orders just inside Scoop, but it's just exploded. I think is 2023 and the end of 2022 just going to be growth years?
Yeah, I think so.
CMS?
I think there's global shortage of technicians, talent to repair blades. Yeah. People are realizing they need to optimize their repair campaigns. They can't just keep deferring indefinitely.
Right.
So there's increasing reliance on condition monitoring to optimize the whole process. So, we're ready for it. So excited and getting ready for what will be ahead of us.
What are some of the high points or some of the key concerns you heard about this week in terms of monitoring systems? What problems are the OEMs and the operators bringing in?
Yeah.
So we got to be able to check this or check that.
I think the aftermarket is always, challenged by how much they can afford.
Sure.
It's, quite tightly constrained financially, so that's always the big thing. Just being aware of what's happening is obviously a part of the whole condition monitoring thing. And there's more and more continuous monitoring systems on the market, and it's good to see that they all have their strengths, and so it's good to see where they all fit into the puzzle, because there's different ways of attacking or not attacking, passively monitoring all these different challenges that are occurring, like lightning versus root zone damage. It's all different.
Right. And the ping module, I can't imagine you envisioned all the things it does now when you were here, many years ago. You say 2016?
2018.
2018, okay. So 4 years ago, could you envision all the things that the ping sensor does?
No, no.
Yeah, right.
No.
It's the
Yeah.
market has driven some of these newer ideas.
Yeah, and basically getting pulled into different areas. So, getting pulled into measuring inside the blade to monitor more significant structural cracks in the root zone. We've got been pulled into that, pulled into ice build-up monitoring, which we released in Sweden this year, and also being pulled into detecting when there's a lightning event as well.
Sure. So the key then to ping is that it's sort of multi-versatile. You can add on these pieces based on customer demand, and customers are demanding to know what's happening inside the blades as well as outside.
Correct.
It seems like that we've heard a lot about this week. Structural issues near the hub seem to be almost top of mind because of some of the failures we've seen in the press. What is this new sensor that the new ping sensor do that goes inside the blade? How does it work, basically?
Yeah, so it uses the same hardware. So
Oh,
for
okay.
us, it's exactly the same hardware without the windshield, because there's not much wind inside a blade.
Hope not.
Hope not. Well, there shouldn't be.
Right.
So we've got exactly the same hardware. We've got new algorithms which are tuned towards root zone damage, which sounds different from the external damage.
Sure.
So different algorithms. So it's just a sort of repackaging. And there's a small challenge about power inside the blade as well.
Yeah, you don't have any solar power to work on.
No sun.
Well, hopefully no sun.
Hopefully no wind and no sun inside the blade.
Right. So you have to come up with a different kind of energy source.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
we've got an alternative energy source, which
All right. Nuclear?
no, that's sun again. No.
Yeah, so there's just a lot going on at the ping headquarters at the moment, I'm sure.
Yes.
Next Hamburg event is 2 years from now. What do you see all the offerings in 2 years? Where's the industry going? Where's the monitoring systems going? Cost is obviously top of mind also. We've seen a lot of that this week.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of dollars for a system.
Yeah, it doesn't really cut it.
Yeah, especially if you have 1,000 turbines, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
So cost is obviously one of those things. But where does the industry go? What are next steps here?
Yeah, I think it's really about triangulation of sensors. So what I mean by that is looking at our acoustic signatures, but other signatures from other sensors, whatever they might be.
Right.
Maybe vibration, or like we've talked about the lightning detection,
Right, yeah.
which is magnetic field sensing. There's other sensors which can go in and around the turbine. So I think it's sort of triangulation of comparing data points, combining them together and getting more insights.
So Matthew, one of the key pieces that I've heard in several discussions this week is related to like drone data. There's just a lot of information coming into an operator, and they're staff limited also. So there's just not a time to process, to review all those images that are coming in, and everybody's trying to put some parameters around it, try to simplify the data down, try to get some what I call data funnels
Yes.
in. But that seems really right where ping is today, is that it's more of a data funnel. And can you explain, like, you're measuring all these different systems, icing, lightning, internal to the blade. You have a number of different sensors, but you're not giving all that information to the end user directly. You're simplifying that. But that happens
Correct.
on the tower, right? That happens internal?
Partly on the tower, or predominantly on the tower, but
Okay.
also at cloud level. So there is too much information, and users of these systems say, I don't want 15 logins.
Right.
So I think over the next 2 years there'll also be a sort of consolidation of combining sensors and drone data,
Right.
imagery, inspections, all the things they need to know about into a sort of combined source, and we're part of that.
Yeah.
It's probably not our vision to drive that transition though.
No, but I think in general, you're almost there, or you may be there directly.
Yeah, we are. We have an ability to exchange data already. So
Right.
we've got a behind the scenes sort of API data transfer system. So that's already happening.
Wow. So the marketplace is just wide open at this point in terms of capability.
Yeah, and I mean, a number of firms have made great progress on trying to amalgamate data sources. So, a number of the ones that are here. And that's why we're partnering up with sort of like-minded organizations where we can help them to enhance the output of their results. So we're fitting into the ecosystem of monitoring blades.
Yes. So this week has been very busy. It sounds like you had a number of large orders, I'll call it. I don't want to get too descriptive there. If someone is interested in the ping unit, they better get on it. They better start reaching out to you pretty soon because the manufacturing-wise, there's just a limited quantity at the moment, and it's going to be in high demand. What should people do who are interested in learning about ping or maybe acquiring 100 ping units? How do they get on your radar screen and get that process started?
Yeah. So absolutely right there for the lightning detection and also the in-blade version. We have a bit of a forward order book there, or orders indicated. So really, it's back to the old website, pingmonitor.co or LinkedIn or
LinkedIn, sure.
or find me.
Yeah, and also YouTube.
Yeah,
Check
YouTube,
out
of course.
Ping's YouTube channel.
Yeah, perfect.
So there's this is Friday, so this is the end of the day on Friday. They just made an announcement they're kicking everybody out of the hall, so we're going to have to go here in a minute.
Yep.
But in terms of shows, this has been
this
fabulous.
Is huge, yeah. And I think there was a lot of excitement because this is the first big event. So it was great.
It was. We were in San Antonio together for the American Clean Power, which was a big show, but this is is Texas scale compared to what we saw in Texas.
Yeah, a factor of 5 bigger. I don't know.
At least a factor of 5. Maybe we're talking about maybe a factor of 8 bigger.
Yeah.
Just the number of people, number of booths, number of new concepts. The Danish Pavilion had about over 100 exhibitors in just their pavilion alone. So you can well imagine there are a ton of new ideas and a number of new concepts being presented. You got to wonder what's going to happen with the industry in this sense. If I was an operator, I'd be overwhelmed right now.
Yeah. I guess
there's a lot going on.
Evaluation of
how do you evaluate
ideas?
Right, and is one of Ping's benefits is that you've been through those trials. You're beyond the trial phase. This thing works. We know it works. It gives you great data. Does that really help stabilize a lot of customer concerns?
Absolutely. We've got some great case studies where we've done larger scale deployments and got great correlation with data. And we also have a continuous sort of research and development program to improve that. But we don't talk about trials and POCs.
Yeah, right. You're in production.
Yeah, we're in production.
You're in massive production at the moment.
Our last order was of 500, a minimum order size of 500. Wow. So that's where we're heading towards.
Well, it's about time. I think the industry needed to do it, but we were in COVID times, so things really slowed down. And now coming out, it's pedal to the metal. To monitoring systems, and that's finally good to see. So, Matthew, thanks for being with us this week. Congratulations on all the exciting news and the news that's about to come. And we'll come back on Uptime anytime you'd like.
Big thanks to Matthew Stead of Ping. That was a great interview, and I'm glad to see Matthew in Hamburg. Well, that's going to do it for this week's Uptime Wind Energy podcast. Thanks for listening. Please take a moment and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast platform. And be sure to subscribe in the show notes below to Uptime Tech News, our weekly newsletter, as well as Rosemary's YouTube channel, Engineering with Rosie. And we'll see you here next week on the Uptime Wind Energy podcast.